Qur'an, Chapter 06, Al-An'am Cattle by Sayyid Qutb, translation by Muhammad Al-Amrani. This surah is Meccan, part of the Qur'an revealed in Mecca. The Qur'an that was given to the Messenger of God, peace and blessings be upon him, over a span of 13 years, addressing one central issue. This issue remained unchanged, though the manner of its presentation was ever renewed, seldom repeated. For the Quranic style presents its core message anew each time, as if addressing it for the first instance. It dealt with the primary pivotal issue in this new religion, the issue of faith embodied in its fundamental tenet, godhood and slavehood, or divine and servitude, and the relationship between them. This discourse was directed to humanity at large, humanity in its essence. In this regard, the Arab of that era is akin to the Arab of any epoch, just as the Arab parallels any human across all times and places. It is the issue of humanity that remains immutable, for it concerns their existence within this universe and their destiny. It addresses their relationship with this cosmos and other living beings, and their relationship with the creator of this universe and these beings. It is an unchanging issue because it concerns existence and the essence of humanity. It answered the profound questions. Who are they? From where did they originate? How did they come to be? Why are they here? And to where are they ultimately headed? Who brought them from non-existence into being? Who will take them away, and what fate awaits them thereafter? Moreover, it explained, what is this existence they perceive and experience, sensing an unseen realm beyond? Who created this intricate universe filled with mysteries? Who governs it, alters it, renews and changes it in the manner observed? It also guided them on how to interact with the creator of this universe, with the universe itself, and how servants should engage with the creator of all beings. This was the major issue, the bedrock of human existence. It will persist as the principal issue throughout time. Thus, 13 full years were devoted to establishing this fundamental issue, the issue that takes precedence in human life, from which all other requirements and branches stem. The Makkan Qur'an did not venture beyond this foundational issue to any aspects related to the life system until God willed it had been thoroughly explained and firmly rooted in the hearts of the chosen group of humanity, whom God had destined to uphold this religion and to establish the practical system that embodies this faith. Advocates of God's religion and those striving to establish its principles in real life should deeply ponder this significant phenomenon. The phenomenon of the Meccan Qur'an dedicating 13 years to affirming this faith, halting there without moving to any systemic details or legislation governing the Muslim society that would embrace this faith. It was God's wisdom that the issue of faith should be the central focus of the call from the very inception of the message, that the messenger of God, peace and blessings be upon him, should begin his mission by inviting people to bear witness that there is no deity but God, and persist in making people aware of their true Lord, worshipping him alone. From an apparent and human perspective, this might not seem the easiest approach to reach the hearts of the Arabs, for they understood from their language what God, and there is no deity, but God implied. They knew that divinity entailed supreme governance. They knew that monotheism and dedicating divinity solely to God meant stripping away the authority wielded by priests, tribal elders, princes and rulers, and returning all authority to God. Authority over consciences, rituals and the realities of life. Authority over wealth, judiciary, and over souls and bodies. They understood that there is no deity but God signified a revolution against earthly authority that usurps the foremost attributes of divinity, a rebellion against the conditions established on this usurpation, and an insurrection against authorities ruling by laws not ordained by God. The Arabs, proficient in their language, comprehended the profound implications of the call to "there is no deity but God," what this call meant for their conditions, leadership and authority. Hence, they met this call, or this revolution, with intense resistance and fought it fiercely in a well-known conflict. So why was this the starting point of the call? Why did God's wisdom necessitate beginning with such a profound struggle? The messenger of God, peace and blessings be upon him, was sent with this divine mission when the most fertile and prosperous lands of the Arabs were not in their possession. They were under the dominion of other nations. All of the Levant in the north was under Roman rule, governed by Arab princes appointed by the Romans. All of Yemen in the south was under Persian rule, governed by Arab princes appointed by the Persians. The only lands the Arabs controlled were the barren regions of Hijaz, Najd, and the surrounding deserts, with scattered fertile oases here and there. The Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, known as the truthful and trustworthy, chosen by the Quraysh nobles to place the Black Stone 15 years prior, and hailing from the noble lineage of Bani Hashim, the highest clan of Quraysh, could have easily incited an Arab nationalism aimed at uniting the fragmented Arab tribes. He could have directed them towards a nationalist cause to reclaim their usurped lands from the occupying empires, the Romans in the north and the Persians in the south, raising the banner of Arabism and establishing a strong unity throughout the peninsula. If the messenger of God, peace and blessings be upon him, had called for this, the Arabs would have likely responded en masse, instead of him enduring 13 years of opposition from the rulers of the peninsula. One might argue that Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, could have, after gaining the support of the Arabs and being appointed as their leader, used this authority to establish the monotheistic creed that his Lord had sent him with, and to subjugate people to the authority of their Lord, after they had been subjugated to his own authority. But God, glory be to him, the all-knowing, the wise, did not direct his messenger, peace and blessings be upon him, towards this path. Instead, he directed him to proclaim there is no deity but God, and to endure, along with the few who responded to him, all the hardships. Why? God, glory be to him, did not intend to burden his messenger and the believers with unnecessary hardship. He, glory be to him, knew that this was not the way. The way was not to free the land from the grasp of Roman or Persian tyrants, only to place it in the hands of an Arab tyrant. All tyranny is tyranny. The land belongs to God, and it must be liberated for God. It will not be liberated for God until the banner of "There is no deity but God" is raised. The way was not to free people in this land from Roman or Persian tyranny, only to place them under Arab tyranny. All tyranny is tyranny. People are servants of God alone, and they will not be servants of God alone until the banner of "There is no deity but God" is raised. There is no deity but God, as the Arabs understood it. No sovereignty except for God, no law except from God, no authority of anyone over anyone else, because all authority belongs to God. The nationality that Islam wants for people is the nationality of faith, wherein the Arab, Roman, Persian, and all other races and colours are equal under the banner of God. This is the way. The messenger of God, peace and blessings be upon him, was sent with this religion when Arab society was at its worst in terms of wealth distribution and justice. A small minority controlled wealth and trade, engaging in usury to multiply their wealth, while the vast majority lived in poverty and hunger. Those who controlled wealth also controlled honour and status, while vast crowds were deprived of both wealth and honour. The Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, could have raised a social banner, inciting war against the elite class, launching a call aimed at reforming the situation and returning the wealth of the rich to the poor. If the messenger of God, peace and blessings be upon him, had called for this, Arab society would have split into two factions, the overwhelming majority supporting the new call against the tyranny of wealth and status, instead of the whole society standing against "there is no deity but God," which only the exceptional few could rise to comprehend at that time. One might argue that Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, could have, after gaining the majority's support and leadership, used his position and authority to establish the monotheistic creed that his Lord had sent him with, and to subjugate people to the authority of their Lord after they had been subjugated to his own authority. But God, glory be to him, the all-knowing, the wise, did not direct him towards this path. Instead, he directed him to proclaim "there is no deity but God," and to endure, along with the few who responded to him, all the hardships. God, glorified and exalted, is fully aware that the path of true reform must emerge from a comprehensive, faith-based perspective that attributes all authority to him alone. This perspective requires a willing and content acceptance of God's decrees regarding justice in distribution and mutual responsibility among all people. It instills in both the giver and the receiver the understanding that they are adhering to a system approved by God, hoping for goodness and reward in both this world and the hereafter. In such a system, hearts are not filled with greed, nor with hatred, and matters are not governed by the sword, the stick, or intimidation and terror. This prevents hearts from becoming corrupt and souls from being stifled, as happens in systems established on principles other than "there is no deity but God." The messenger of God, peace and blessings be upon him, was sent when the moral standards in the Arabian Peninsula were at their lowest in many aspects, despite the presence of some raw Bedouin virtues in the society. Injustice was rampant in the community, epitomized by the wisdom of the poet Zuhair ibn Abi Sulma, and whoever does not defend his basin with his weapon, it will be destroyed, and whoever does not oppress people will be oppressed. This is also reflected in the common saying, "Support your brother, whether he is an oppressor or oppressed." Alcohol and gambling were widespread traditions and even sources of pride in society. This trait is expressed throughout pre-Islamic poetry, such as in the words of Tarafa ibn al-Abd. "If not for three things which adorn a young man by thee, grandfather, I would not care when my staff falls, death. Among them is my outpacing the reproaches with a drink of aged wine that foams when mixed with water." Prostitution in various forms was also a feature of this society. As Aisha, may God be pleased with her, narrated, marriage in the pre-Islamic era was of four types. One was like the marriage of people today, where a man would propose to another man's daughter or ward, pay the dowry, and marry her. Another type was when a man would say to his wife, after she had finished her menstrual cycle, "Go to so-and-so and conceive from him," and her husband would stay away from her and not touch her until it was clear whether she was pregnant by that man. If she became pregnant, her husband would approach her if he wished. This was done for the sake of having a noble child, and it was called marriage of seeking offspring. Another type involved a group of fewer than 10 men who would visit a woman and all have relations with her. If she became pregnant and gave birth after a few nights, she would send for them, and none of them could refuse to come. When they gathered, she would say, "You know what you have done, and I have given birth to a child. It is your child so-and-so," naming whoever she liked, and the child would be attributed to him, and he could not refuse. The fourth type was when many men would visit a woman who would not refuse anyone. These were prostitutes who would put flags on their doors as a sign. If one of them gave birth, they would gather and call for a physiognomist who would attribute the child to whoever they saw fit, and he would be recognized as the father, and he could not refuse. Reported by Al-Bukhari in the Book of Marriage. The Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, could have announced a reformist call addressing moral rectification, purification of society, cultivation of souls, and adjustment of values and standards. At that time he would have found, just as every moral reformer in any environment finds, pure-hearted individuals who were pained by such corruption and driven by a sense of honor and nobility to respond to a call for reform and purification. And perhaps someone might say, if the messenger of God, peace and blessings be upon him, had pursued a path of moral reform first, winning over a virtuous group whose morals were purified and whose spirits were elevated, they would have been more receptive to accepting and spreading the faith. This, instead of the strong opposition that arose when he called to the oneness of God from the very beginning. But God, glorified and exalted, did not guide his messenger, peace and blessings be upon him, toward such a path. God knew that this was not the right path. He knew that morality could only be established on the foundation of a belief system that defines values, sets standards, and determines the authority to which these values and standards are accountable. It also defines the reward and punishment that this authority can bestow or impose on adherents and violators. Without establishing this belief system first, all values remain unstable, and the morals based on them remain shaky, without any regulation, authority, or accountability. Once the belief system was established after great effort, and the authority it rests upon was recognized, people knew their Lord and worshipped him alone. Once people were liberated from the domination of others and the tyranny of their desires, once there is no deity, but God was firmly established in their hearts, God achieved through them and for them everything that reformers might propose. The land was purified of Romans and Persians, not to establish Arab rule, but to establish the rule of God. It was cleansed of all tyranny, whether Roman, Persian, or Arab. Society was purified of social injustice in its entirety. The Islamic system was established, implementing God's justice, weighing with God's scales, and raising the banner of social justice solely in God's name. This banner was called the Banner of Islam, inscribed with, "There is no deity but God." Hearts and morals were purified, souls were elevated, and spirits were refined without the need for the penalties and punishments prescribed by God, except in the rarest of instances, because there was an inner watchfulness within consciences. The desire for God's pleasure and reward and the fear of his wrath and punishment took the place of surveillance and penalties. Humanity rose in its system, morals, and entire life to a pinnacle it had never reached before and has not reached since except under the shade of Islam. All this was achieved because those who established this religion in the form of a state, system, laws and judgments had first established it in their consciences and lives as a belief, character, worship and conduct. They were promised one reward for establishing this religion, a reward that did not include dominance and power, not even for this religion at their hands. They were promised one reward that had nothing to do with this world. That reward was paradise. This was all they were promised for their exhausting struggle, severe trials, steadfast pursuit of the call, and facing the Jahiliyyah that people with power in every time and place despise. There is no deity but God. When God tested them, they were patient. When their souls were cleansed of their personal desires, and when God knew that they did not seek any reward on this earth, no matter what it was, even if it was the victory of this call at their hands and the establishment of this religion through their efforts, no pride in their hearts for any race, nation, land or tribe, God knew they had become trustworthy stewards of this great trust. They were worthy of the belief that God alone holds sovereignty in hearts, consciences, behavior, rituals, and in all affairs. They were also worthy of the authority placed in their hands to implement God's law and establish his justice without seeking anything for themselves, their families, their nation, or their race. The authority they held was for God, his religion, and his law, knowing it was God who bestowed it upon them. None of this blessed path could have been achieved at such a lofty level unless the call had begun in this way, raising this banner alone. The banner of "there is no deity but God," and not lifting any other alongside it. This call had to tread this seemingly difficult yet truly blessed and easy path. This blessed path could not have been pure for God if the call had begun as a nationalistic, social or moral reform call, or if it had raised any banner alongside its sole banner, La ilaha illa Allah, there is no deity but God. This is why the entire Meccan Qur'an focused on establishing there is no deity but God in hearts and minds, choosing this path despite its apparent difficulty and refraining from choosing other side paths, insisting on this way. As for the Qur'an's approach to addressing issues of belief alone, without delving into the details of the system based on it and the laws that regulate transactions, this is also something that those calling to this religion should thoughtfully consider. The nature of this religion necessitates such an approach. It is a faith that entirely revolves around the concept of monotheism. All its regulations and legislation stem from this grand principle. Just as a massive, towering and expansive tree with intertwined branches and vast shadows must have its roots deep and widespread in the soil to match its grandeur and spread in the air, so too does this religion. Its system encompasses all aspects of life, overseeing both the major and minor affairs of humanity. It organizes human life not only in this worldly existence, but also in the hereafter, not only in the visible realm, but also in the hidden one, not merely in material transactions, but also in the depths of conscience and the world of secrets and intentions. It is a vast, immense and sprawling institution. Therefore, it must have roots and depths as wide, grand, deep and widespread as itself. This is part of the secret of this religion and its nature, defining its method of building and expansion. It makes the construction and solidification of faith, along with its comprehensive nature and pervasive influence on all aspects of the self, essential for proper formation. This ensures consistency and harmony between the visible tree in the air and its deep-reaching roots. When the belief in there is no deity but God is firmly rooted in the deepest parts, the system embodying this belief stabilizes concurrently. It becomes evident that this is the only system acceptable to those whose hearts hold this creed. These souls submit to this system even before its details and legislations are presented to them. Through such submission, people received the regulations and laws of Islam with acceptance and compliance, never objecting upon their issuance, nor hesitating to implement them upon reception. Thus, alcohol was prohibited, usury was abolished, gambling was forbidden, and all pre-Islamic customs were eradicated by the verses of the Qur'an or the words of the Messenger of God, peace and blessings be upon him. Meanwhile, earthly governments strive with their laws, legislations, systems, authorities and propaganda to achieve such changes, yet they only manage to control visible violations while society remains rife with prohibited and reprehensible acts. Another aspect of the nature of this religion is evident in this sound method. This religion is a practical, dynamic and serious approach. It is meant to govern real life and address reality, to enact its orders, whether to approve, amend or change it altogether. Consequently, it does not legislate except for actual situations in a society that initially acknowledges God's sovereignty alone. It is not a theory dealing with hypotheses, it is a method that deals with reality. Therefore, a Muslim society must first be established, recognizing the creed of there is no deity but God, and that sovereignty rests solely with God. It rejects attributing sovereignty to anyone other than God, and refuses to legitimize any system not based on this principle. When this society is established, It will have a real life requiring organization and legislation. Only then does this religion begin to set forth systems and enact laws for people who have already submitted to these systems and laws, initially rejecting any other systems and laws. Believers in this creed must have the authority over themselves and their society to ensure the implementation of the system and laws within this community. This grants the system its prestige and the law its seriousness, besides providing the community's life with the reality that necessitates immediate systems and laws. The Muslims in Mecca did not have authority over themselves or their community. They did not possess an independent real life to organize under God's law. Thus, during this period, God did not reveal systems and laws, but rather instilled a creed and morality derived from the creed after it had taken deep root. When they established a state with authority in Medina, the laws were revealed and the system was established to address the real needs of the Muslim community, which the state would enforce with its authority and seriousness. God did not choose to reveal the system and laws in Mecca for them to be stored and applied once the state in Medina was established. This is not the nature of this religion. It is more realistic and serious than that. It does not hypothesize problems to propose solutions for them. Instead, it faces reality with its size, shape and circumstances to mold it into its unique form according to its specifics. Those who seek from Islam today to shape a system and legislations for life, while there is no society on earth that has decided to implement God's law alone, rejecting all other laws and possessing the authority to impose and enforce this, do not understand the nature of this religion or how it operates in life as God intended. They want it to change its nature, method and history to resemble human systems and methods. They try to hasten it to meet momentary desires in their souls, created by internal defeat towards trivial human systems. They want it to shape itself in the form of hypotheses to face a non-existent future. But God wants this religion to be as He willed it, a creed that fills the heart and imposes its authority on the conscience, a creed that implies that people only submit to God and only receive legislations from God. After people who hold this creed exist and gain authority in their society, legislation begins to meet their real needs and organize their real life accordingly. It must also be understood by the advocates of Islam that when they call people to re-establish this religion, they should first invite them to embrace the creed, even if they call themselves Muslims and their birth certificates testify to their Islam. They must teach them that Islam is primarily the acknowledgement of the creed. There is no deity but God in its true sense, meaning returning sovereignty to God in all their affairs and expelling those who usurp God's authority by claiming this right for themselves. This acknowledgement must be established in their consciences, rituals, situations and realities. Let this issue be the foundation of calling people to Islam, just as it was the foundation of calling them to Islam the first time. This call was undertaken by the Meccan Qur'an for 13 full years. If a group of people enters this religion with this original understanding, they are the ones fit to practice the Islamic system in their social life, because they have decided among themselves to base their lives on this foundation and to govern their entire existence solely by God. When such a society indeed arises, the foundational principles of the Islamic system are laid before it. This society then embarks on crafting legislations tailored to its real-life circumstances, all within the broader framework of the Islamic system. This sequence of steps epitomizes the correct, practical, realistic and earnest Islamic methodology. However, some sincere yet hasty individuals who fail to contemplate the true nature of this religion and its sound divine methodology rooted in the wisdom of the all-knowing, all-wise, and his profound understanding of human nature and life's necessities, might mistakenly believe that presenting the foundations of the Islamic system, or even its legislations, to the people would streamline the path of the call and make this religion more appealing to them. Such an illusion is born out of haste. It is reminiscent of earlier suggestions that the Prophet's mission, peace be upon him, should initially proceed under the guise of nationalism, social reform, or morality to facilitate its acceptance. Souls must first be devoted to God, declaring their servitude by accepting his law alone and rejecting all other laws in principle, before being addressed with any details about that law to motivate them. Desire must arise from a longing to dedicate oneself to God and liberate from the dominion of others, not because the system presented is, in certain aspects, superior to their current one. God's system is inherently good because it is his law. The laws crafted by human beings can never compare to the laws of God. But this is not the foundation of the call. The essence of the call lies in accepting God's law alone and rejecting all other laws. This in itself is Islam. Islam has no other meaning. This is a fundamental aspect of faith. Moreover, we must examine how the Makkan Qur'an addressed the issue of creed over 13 years. It was not presented as a theory, nor as theology, or through dialectical arguments, as pursued later by what came to be known as the science of monotheism or theology. The noble Qur'an spoke to human nature through the signs within their own existence and the world around them. It rescued their nature from the layers of corruption, cleared the innate receptors from what had dulled their functions, and opened the windows of their nature to receive and respond to impactful inspirations. The Surah before us is a complete model of this unique methodology, and we will discuss its characteristics shortly. Generally speaking, the Qur'an dealt with this creed in the context of a living, realistic battle. It combated the layers obstructing human nature in the present, real human souls. Thus, presenting it as a theory was not suitable for this present reality. It was a form of living confrontation with the psychological and real-life barriers in living souls. Similarly, the dialectical argument used by the later science of monotheism was not suitable. The Qur'an faced an entire human reality with all its living circumstances and addressed the whole human being within this reality. Likewise, theology was not suitable because although the Islamic creed is a creed, it represents a realistic life methodology for practical application, not confined to the narrow confines of theoretical theological research. While building the creed within the conscience of the Muslim community, the Qur'an engaged this community in a massive battle against the surrounding ignorance, as well as against the remnants of ignorance within its conscience, morals, and reality. From these circumstances emerged the building of the creed, not in the form of a theory, theology, or dialectical argument, but in the form of direct organizational formation of life, represented by the Muslim community itself. The growth of the Muslim community in its conceptual belief, realistic behavior according to this belief, and its training in confronting ignorance as an organized entity resisting it, represented the very growth of the creedal structure, a living translation of it. This is the Islamic methodology which also reflects its intrinsic nature. It is essential for the proponents of the Islamic call to comprehend the essence of this religion and its dynamic methodology, as we have elucidated. They must recognize that the phase of building the creed, which extended during the Makkan period in this particular manner, was integrally connected to the phase of practical formation of the Islamic movement and the actual construction of the Muslim community. It was not a phase of mere theoretical reception and study. Rather, It was a foundational phase for the creed, the community, the movement, and the actual existence all at once. This approach should be adopted whenever there is a desire to reconstruct this edifice anew. The phase of creed building should be extended, with its steps taken slowly, deeply, and steadily. Furthermore, this phase should not be a theoretical study of the creed. Rather, it should be a translation of this creed into a living form, represented in consciences shaped by this creed, embodied in a communal structure whose growth mirrors the growth of the creed itself, and manifested in a realistic movement that confronts ignorance and engages in battle with it both within the conscience and in reality, allowing the creed to manifest as a living entity and grow dynamically amidst the struggle. It is a grave error with respect to Islam to crystallize the theory into a mere abstract form for theoretical intellectual study. This is not only an error, but also a significant danger. The Qur'an did not spend 13 full years building the creed simply because it was being revealed for the first time. No. If God had willed, he could have revealed the Qur'an all at once and left its companions to study it for 13 years or more or less until they comprehended the Islamic theory. But God, the Exalted, intended something else. He wanted a specific, unique methodology. He wanted to build the community, the movement, and the creed simultaneously. He wanted to build the community and the movement through the creed, and to build the creed through the community and the movement. He intended the creed to be the actual reality of the community, and the dynamic reality of the community to be the image of the creed. God knew that building souls and communities does not happen overnight. Thus, the building of the creed had to take the time required for building souls and the community. When the creedal formation matured, the community itself was the tangible manifestation of this maturity. This is the nature of this religion, as derived from the Maccan Quranic methodology, and we must understand this nature and not attempt to alter it to meet the hurried desires defeated by the forms of human theories. With this nature, the Muslim community was created for the first time, and with it the Muslim community is formed whenever there is a desire to bring it into existence again, as God brought it forth the first time. We must recognize the error and danger of attempting to convert the living Islamic creed, which should be embodied in a complete, dynamic, living reality, into a mere theory for study and cultural knowledge, simply because we want to confront weak human theories with an Islamic theory. The Islamic creed must be embodied in living souls, in a realistic organization, and in a movement that interacts with the surrounding ignorance, as well as with the ignorance embedded in the souls of its adherents, as they were people of ignorance before the creed entered their souls and extracted them from the ignorant environment. In this form, it occupies a much larger, broader and deeper space in hearts, minds and life than a theory would. It encompasses the space and material of the theory but does not confine itself to it. The Islamic conception of divinity, the cosmic existence, life and humanity is comprehensive and complete. However, it is also realistic and positive. By its nature, it abhors being represented merely in a mental, intellectual conception because this contradicts its nature and purpose. It must be embodied in people, in a living organization, and in a realistic movement. Its method of formation is to grow through people, the living organization and the realistic movement until it is theoretically complete at the same time it is practically complete, never separating into a theoretical form, but remaining represented in the practical form. Any theoretical growth preceding the practical dynamic growth and not represented through it is a grave error and danger concerning the nature of this religion, its purpose and its intrinsic structure. God the Exalted says, and it is a Qur'an which we have separated by intervals that you might recite it to the people over a prolonged period. And we have sent it down progressively. Qur'an 17:106. The separation is intentional, and the prolonged period is intentional as well, so that the constructive formation, composed of a creed in the form of a living organization, not a theoretical knowledge, is achieved. The adherents of this religion must know well that just as this religion is divine, its method of action is also divine, consistent with its nature. One cannot separate the essence of this religion from its method of action. They must also know that this religion, just as it came to change the creedal conception and thereby change the living reality, it also came to change the intellectual and dynamic methodology by which the creedal conception is built and the living reality is changed. It came to build a creed while building a community. Then, to establish a unique method of thinking to the same degree, it establishes a creedal conception and a living reality. There is no separation between its unique method of thinking, its creedal conception, and its living structure. They are all a single entity. If we grasp the methodology of action, as we have outlined, we must also recognize that this methodology is foundational. It is not merely a phase, an environment, or circumstances specific to the early Muslim community. It is the essential methodology without which this religion cannot be established. Islam's role was not only to change people's beliefs and their reality, its role was also to transform their way of thinking and their approach to conceptions and reality. This is because it is a divine methodology, wholly different in nature from the limited and feeble methodologies of humans. We cannot achieve a divine conception and a divine life except through a divine way of thinking. God intended to establish a methodology for human thinking based on this divine foundation to ensure the correctness of their conceptions and their vital formation. When we demand of Islam that it transform itself into a theory for study, we deviate from the divine methodology of formation and the divine way of thinking. We subject Islam to the methodologies of human thinking, as if the divine methodology is inferior to human methodologies, as if we seek to elevate God's methodology in conception and movement to match the methodologies of mere mortals. This perspective is dangerous, and the defeat it brings is fatal. The role of the divine methodology is to provide us, the adherents of the Islamic call, with a unique way of thinking that frees us from the residues of the prevalent methods of ignorant thinking that dominate the world and infiltrate our culture. If we attempt to engage with this religion using a way of thinking alien to its nature, stemming from the prevailing ignorant methodologies, we invalidate its role intended for humanity. We deprive ourselves of the chance to escape the pressure of the prevailing ignorant methodology of our era, and to rid ourselves of its residues from our minds and formation. This matter is equally critical, and the loss it entails is deadly. The methodology of thinking and movement in the construction of Islam is as valuable and necessary as the methodology of creedal conception and vital system. It is not separate from them either. No matter how much we imagine presenting that conception and this system in an expressive form, we must not forget that this does not establish Islam on earth as a realistic movement. Moreover, we must remember that presenting Islam in this form benefits only those actively engaged in a real Islamic movement. The utmost benefit they derive from our presentation of Islam in this form is their interaction with it to the extent they have already achieved during their movement. Once again, I emphasize that the creedal conception must immediately be represented in a dynamic gathering, and that this dynamic gathering must simultaneously be a true representation and genuine translation of the creedal conception. I also reiterate that this is the natural divine methodology of Islam. and it is superior, more upright, more effective, and more in harmony with human nature than the methodology of formulating complete independent theories and presenting them in a cold, intellectual manner to people before they are actively engaged in a realistic movement and before they themselves become a growing step-by-step translation of that theoretical concept. If this is true for the foundational theory, it is even more accurate, naturally, concerning presenting the foundational system in which the Islamic conception is embodied or presenting the detailed legislations of this system. The surrounding ignorance pressures some sincere proponents of the Islamic call, causing them to hasten the steps of the Islamic methodology. It sometimes deliberately embarrasses them by asking, "Where are the details of your system that you call for? What have you prepared in terms of research, details, and projects for its implementation?" In doing so, it aims to hasten them away from their methodology, making them bypass the phase of building the creed and altering their divine methodology from its nature, which crystallizes the theory through movement, defines the system through practice, and establishes legislations amidst addressing real-life problems. It is the duty of the proponents of the Islamic call not to succumb to this maneuver. They must refuse to have a foreign methodology imposed on their movement and religion. They must not be swayed by those who do not believe. It is their duty to expose the maneuver of embarrassment, to rise above it, and to act according to their religion's methodology and movement. This is one of the secrets of its strength and the source of their strength as well. In Islam, the methodology equals the truth. There is no separation between them. Any foreign methodology cannot realize Islam in the end. Foreign methodologies can achieve their human systems, but they cannot realize our divine system. Adherence to the methodology is as necessary as adherence to the creed and the system in every Islamic movement, not just in the first Islamic movement, as some people think. This is my final word. I hope that with this explanation of the nature of the Meccan Qur'an and the divine methodology embodied in it, I have conveyed the message. May the proponents of the Islamic call understand the nature of their methodology, trust in it, find peace in it, and know that what they have is better and that they are the superior ones. This Qur'an indeed guides to that which is most upright. Qur'an 17 verse 9. God has spoken the truth.